how the construction industry here in South Africa is in need of serious care if it's going to ever return to its former glory. How do we even begin to rebuild the industry? Now, the man joining me now may have some of the answers. His name is Ken Stewart. He's the director at the Turnaround Management Association of Southern Africa, an organization that specializes in business rescue and turnaround. I assume in the construction industry of South Africa, you've been in big demand in these last few years.
Well, yes, but I think, Chris, what to understand about the construction industry, it's somewhat anomalous in the sense that it's very high risk and very low profit. In fact, a number of years ago in my youth, I asked my auditors to tell me what was a good return for a construction company, and they came back, and they were doing 3 of the big 5 at the time, and they came back and said 2% before interest and tax.
Really?
Now, after the collusion of the 2010 World Cup, construction companies were faced with a bill of 1.46 billion to repay. Now, if you divide that by 0.2 or even 0.02 or 0.05, you come up to a huge number, many, many billions, before they can recoup that fine.
So, in terms of what's at the root? There's been a lot of talk in the papers about how much in trouble the construction industry here, which was once a license, was it not, to make money?
Well, not really, Chris. I mean, it's never been a license to make money, but the work was there, and the turnover was there, and the major construction companies like Avenge and Group 5 that are in serious trouble right now, they had the turnover to pay their overheads and still make a decent profit. But bearing in mind they're doing billions of rands worth of contracts, so 2, 3 or 4% on that is still quite a nice profit. But it's really, since the World Cup, 2008 to 2010 were fantastic years. And that's when the industry was really buoyant. But one only has to look at Avenge, for example. That's Grinneke LTA. A few years ago, not even 5 years ago, their share price was north of 30 Rand. Today it's 4 cents.
Yeah.
And Avenge have made it known they're offloading Grinneke LTA. Similarly with Group 5. Group 5 are in serious trouble. They've got that contract in Ghana, the Capone power plant. They want to hit them with $62.5 million in late penalties.
What is going to happen with that Ghana contract?
Well, it's gone into litigation, obviously. But again, you can rest assured that the client there has withheld as much money as he can on Group 5.
Well, what went wrong there?
Basically, it was a supply of coal to the plant. Group 5 say it was substandard, and of course there's a fight about that. That's basically it. Yeah.
And I mean, that's another major blow for Group 5, which...
Absolutely. I mean, Group 5 is looking to offload their construction business, which is a shame. I mean, it did start life as a construction business, a construction company, and then it's sort of morphed into other businesses as well. But essentially, that we're going to lose one of the major players. We've lost one already. Basil Reed went into business rescue. And I'm involved in that business rescue, not as a practitioner, but I'm acting for one of their major subcontractors. And it's terrible out there. Basil Reed as well, they've got another problem, because after they went into business rescue, in Lesotho, they've got a problem with a mining contract. 600 million has gone astray, and they're being nailed on that as well. So, yeah, it's a bloodbath out there. It really is.
So, is it likely then, the word I hear is that there could be consolidation in the industry? Some of the survivors who get through these difficult times are going to pick up some of the people who fall by the wayside. How likely is that going to happen?
Look, I think it's very likely. I mean, the industry's on an iron lung at the moment. It really is. So this is inevitably going to happen. But, there are still 2 or 3 major companies, Wilson Bailey Holmes Ofcon, Stefaniti Stocks, Raubex, they're a road contractor. They are still looking relatively healthy, so they are likely to form the backbone of any turnaround. But, you know, I'm in the turnaround industry now, and I can tell you that the major thing that, the major resource that any turnaround requires is cash.
What would be your advice, you know, as a turnaround person to the construction companies of South Africa to help try and survive these difficult times?
Well, I think one of the first things that one has to appreciate is our national debt stands at about 2.8 trillion. Now that is 500 million rand per day in interest. Let me repeat that, 500 million a day in interest. So that's a major constraint. The state-owned companies, they owe 800 billion. Now, a colleague of mine has made a case that these state-owned companies should go into business rescue. And they are absolute candidates for business rescue. That would be the first step in the right direction. Secondly, the government's got no money. So the money has to come from the private sector and obviously from China and Saudi Arabia and so on.
Well, speaking about the private sector, I mean, if you walk 100 yards each way here in Sandton, you'll see buildings going up, cranes hanging over, even though there's a load of office space that is sitting there empty.
Well, you know, people have got to find somewhere to put their money, but my property friends tell me that there's 700,000 square meters of vacant office space in Sandton and Johannesburg. So all that's happening is that people will shuffle up, landlords will renegotiate rentals and so on and so forth. But there's still going to be 700,000 square meters of vacant office space. Yeah.
And so overall, coming to the end of this interview, what would be your recommendation for salvation of the construction industry?
Look, there is, you know, some move towards public-private partnerships, and that is very definitely something to do because, for example, the greatest success in that so far has been the renewable energy program, where by the end of construction, which is not far hence, the private industry will have invested 240 billion rand in that, and that's all come from private banks, not from government. But that was linked to power purchase agreements with Eskom, underwritten by Treasury. Now, that sort of thing can happen and will happen, I believe, but, you know, one's got to look at reality. You know, yesterday, you know, the Section 25 of the Constitution, they resolved to go for it. So, you know, you've got perceptions, both internally and externally, not good. And unfortunately, perceptions do tend to become reality. And that's the biggest problem that we've got, in my opinion. But public-private partnerships are the way to go. China's going to invest, but they always use their own people, even down to their laborers. A few years ago, I was involved in a contract in the DRC, and that's exactly what's happened. They just import their own people.